And we are live. Welcome to John Vervaeke podcast. I have very exciting panel today. Valeria, Brad, Peter, Algernon. And we will all be talking about agape. So I would like to start with a clip. Let me see. And takes a minute. Okay.
This is agape. We have to distinguish between three kinds of love: eros, philia, and agape. See, eros is the love that seeks to be one with something. And that can be spiritual, like being one with nature, or it can be being one with a cookie by eating it. Of course, we come to think of eros erotically, right? Being one with somebody by having sex with them. Right? But remember, Socrates knew ta erotica, which wasn't just sex. Socrates knew what to care about. This is philia. So this is the love that is satisfied through consummation. Philia, this is the love that seeks cooperation. This is the love in which we experience reciprocity. We love the cookie because we can consume it. We love our friends because we are in reciprocity with them. What kind of love is this? And this is what Jesus claimed was how God loved individuals. This is the love that a parent has for a child. This is not the love of consummation. You're not trying to consume the child. That's evil. And it's not friendship. You're not, like, when you bring a child home from the hospital, and I've done this twice, right? That's not your friend. It's not even a person. You can't, it's basically a slug. But here's the astonishing thing. You love it. Not because of any way you can consume it or be one with it. Ew. Ew. You don't love it because, hey, what, great friendship. You love it, right? You love it because by loving it, you turn a non-person into a person. It's the closest thing to a miracle, and that sounds hackney, I know, but stop back and think about this. You depend on agape. It's because people loved you before you were a person that you have become the person you are. Love turns non-person animals into moral agent persons. It's like somehow if I could just care about, right, my sofa enough, it would turn into a Ferrari or something. It's that powerful. And here's what Jesus was offering. That love can be exacted and made available for all. Here's what is on offer. Here's why Christianity will take the Roman Empire culturally. With agape, Christianity can say to all of the non-persons of the Roman Empire, all the women, all the children, all the non-male citizens, all the sick, all the poor, all the widowed, can take all of those non-persons and say, we will turn you into persons.
Okay, wow. Agape is some powerful love. So, I would like to learn more. To me, understanding agape is quite hard, whereas for me, love is love. And the idea that there are so many different types of love is, I need to think about it hard. Yeah. So I would like Peter to start. Would you explain a little bit?
Yeah, so to summarize here what agape is a term that John Vervaeke uses to describe a kind of love that is different from eros or romantic love and philia or friendship love. Agape is the love that seeks to transform oneself and the world in a way that is responsive to the sacredness of being. Agape is not based on attraction or affection, but on a deep sense of reverence and awe for the mystery and wonder of existence. Agape is also not based on reciprocity or obligation, but on a radical generosity and openness to the other. Agape is the love that Jesus exemplified in his teachings and actions, according to Vervaeke.
Thank you. Algernon, would you like to add something more?
When I listened to it and he had talked about the philia aspect, I thought that the contrast that got applied there for me was good, which was that philia was about cooperation. And so the parties involved in a philia love, like each side is getting something from it. And that agapic love is like unconditional, and it's not conditional in that you get something from it, that it's fulfilling something for you. And then separate from erotic. So I think it's a useful term to me to sort of separate out the love you can have for something that's not either one of those things. And so like the example that he uses about the love of a parent for a child is one of the frames where it's pretty easy to spot agapic love, in action in the world. And there are more, but I'll leave it at that. So I found the contrast with philia also to be interesting.
Thank you. Valeria?
And I think that the part that I found the most interesting was when he said that the baby was not a person, and that the citizens, like all those kinds of non-male citizens, women in the Roman Empire were not persons. So that is made me think about what a person is. So I quickly looked at Wikipedia, and Wikipedia says a being who has certain capacities or attributes such as reason, morality, consciousness, self-consciousness, and being part of a culturally established form of social relationships like kinship, ownership of property, or legal responsibility. And thinking about that, and agape being the love that turns a non-person into a person, being the kind of love that does not expect reason, morality, consciousness, or responsibility, but accepts you and gives you and loves you in a way that will help you develop those things. So I think that was what in differently from the philia love, which I obviously would, if I'm expecting reciprocity, I want this person to be capable to love me in the same way that I am capable of loving that other person. So that is some of the ideas that are coming up for me now.
Beautiful. So, Brad?
Yeah, the idea of transformation, of creating a person, so the raising of a child and bestowing your knowledge on the child and guiding that child into becoming the person that child will become. And there's a self-sacrificing aspect to agape. It's not inward, it's outward. It's towards the other person, that you are giving up a part of yourself to create this other person. And it's as opposed to eros, which is more of an inward facing love, and more consuming love, as John describes it. So you don't consume your child. You open yourself up to your child, and in return, your child opens yourself up to you. I think later on in another episode, he talks about that love never fails, romantic love can fail. That love does fail, but agape can't fail. We're always born from it, and we always have to give birth to it, or personhood disappears.
Ebenezer?
Well, the way that I was thinking about it, or the thing that was very present in my head, was the love that you give to something that that cannot yet be. Like I was thinking about this plant that I was growing. It's an attention or a care that you give to something like this tree that I'm growing, that even though it hasn't given me anything at the moment, even though it's not a tree, because it hasn't given me, fruits, shade, those kinds of things, and it's that love that comes before it, or before something is, yeah. Goes into like mentoring and as Brett said, like taking care of a child that is not yet, a fully grown person, but it's almost like you're treating them like like they will be a fully grown person, or like they, yeah.
So in the clip, John also talked about transformative power of love. So basically, there is a potential in there, and that potential, or loving them for something that might happen, let's say, gives a direction to grow, in a sense. I was wondering what you guys thought about that. It's a free flow conversation. Would like to address that.
I think it's important to mention that John did not create these words, right? They go all the way
Yes.
back to Plato and
Time traveler.
and before, I don't know, but at least as far as ancient Greece.
So you were saying that agape gives potential to grow, and like what was the mechanism behind that, or like why it gives potential to grow?
Okay, let's say there is a baby, and the baby basically poops and demands food all the time, and we love that baby, not because it poops and demands our time. We love it despite that, and it's for what it represents. It's the child. It's a part of us. It's the care, and this parental sort of extended type of love.
I see.
This is the potential I'm talking about.
Okay, that makes sense. So like if you take a child and you raise that child without any parents, just in the wild, like they don't learn a language, they don't learn what it's like to be human, they reach a point where they can't develop past a certain point. They reach a point of no return. And Vervaeke was bringing up this idea, which I thought was kind of interesting, that in the Roman Empire, there were many people that weren't considered people. And this agape love could take those people that weren't considered people and make them into persons, which is a very interesting idea. What it means to be a person in that sense, because that's something I think we all take for granted, is if you're just born into this world, you're a person. And it seems incredibly dehumanizing to not think that way. But I guess that wasn't really a problem for the ancient world. But still, that's more of like a ethical aspect, but it seems like there's a legitimate psychological aspect behind this as well. Because one of the things that Vervaeke says in that episode, that I don't think was in that clip, was that we gain a sense of ourself based upon how others have internalized, or how we've internalized other people's attention on us. So if we have a parent that's very cruel and malevolent towards us, we can become very cruel and malevolent ourselves and towards ourselves as well. But if we have a parent that's very loving unconditionally, then that will become a reflection of ourselves as well.
I see.
Now, I don't know how much of that is like entirely true or accurate, because I know that, you know, there's a common trope, at least within my generation, that there's many folk in my generation who are very angry at their parents when their parents would say like, well, we were very loving and unselfish and kind, you know, and gave you everything that you needed, and you're just taking all these things for granted, you know. And so I don't know how much of that is like the responsibility of the parent, how much of it is responsibility of the child. But regardless, that's an idea that Vervaeke brought up that I thought was really interesting.
I really like that idea, and especially in terms of I guess dealing with potential, because that's the way that I was thinking about it. It's this love requires you to take a perspective in which you're looking at the potential of this person and trying to engage with that potential rather than the person that they are. Like what Kara was saying about the baby. You know, right now they're shitting everywhere. I don't know. But like that's not necessarily what you're dealing with. You're dealing with the potential of this baby, like who they will become rather than who they are. And it's almost like well, when you were talking, I was thinking that the way that you deal with somebody else, or the perspective that you take on their potential, kind of I guess affects their perspective on others, or I feel like there's like a transfer of that perspective from you down to the person that you're, you know, loving, that you're, you know, giving this agapic love to. And in like from the way that you're talking, it seems like it works in the negative and positive sense, not that, you know, love is just this all positive emotion. You can still be agapic in the way that you're cruel to your, you know, son or daughter, and that will sort of pass on. But it's almost like it's that perspective that you take on the potential of somebody.
I would separate the passing on from agape. I think
Oh, I
agape
see.
necessarily is like they Christ emphasizes as the love of God, or like the love of what you can become, like the best part of you that you can become. Well, we have this psychological mechanism where we internalize the perspectives that others have for us, and so if they love us, then we can develop love. If they don't, then we don't. And so yeah, that's what I would say.
But isn't it that the aim of it has to be outside of yourself?
Yes, yeah,
Like
I can't be egocentric.
If the kid is to go on to become agapic, it's not like, you know, my parents loved me and now I love me.
Right.
You're like,
That's a very good point.
Missed the lesson.
Yeah, Vervaeke also says that the child, while they receive the agape love, from their perspective, it's consuming. They're consuming the agape love to make themselves into a person.
Yeah,
so
but I guess like
something that you give.
the propagation into the future, like I think is, you know, the grand sense of agape is that this would apply. You know, it's not for the parent benefit. It's not even for the kid benefit. Like they become a person in reflection of the adult, but with the intention of agape toward other people outside of themselves.
Right. I think that's
like
a good point.
Aim of the agape writ large. It happens. It seems like it happens on multiple scales. It's individual, one-to-one, parent, family, community level, maybe company, maybe country, to species, to planet.
One thing that our well, I mean, when you said our generation or your generation has this trope of being angry with the parents, and I think that's because we take for granted the expectation that they are going to love us so in a way that is so selfless, not self-centered. Yeah, in a way that is so selfless and attuned to us, that we are going to grow in a certain way. But if you think about the fact that if the if we don't have anybody taking care of us, we are not even going to grow up. We are like completely dependent on other people. When we're born, we don't have any capabilities. So if we are here, or even the child raised in the wild, somebody raised that child. They might not have learned language, they might not have learned anything, but if there is nobody taking care of it, it cannot survive.
It cannot be
Yeah.
in this world. So is agape something that like makes things be, or
Makes things be.
is agape the thing that makes things be?
Makes things be. Yes, yeah. I think that's very apt. That I think
Also,
agape is the thing that it's the love of creation. It's an unselfish, unconditional love where you create and then you have no expectations for it. It's like you create it and then that's it.
Yeah.
It'll become what it will become.
I
And
see.
I'm sure many Christians will disagree with that. Because I think God does have expectations for us, but yeah, so I digress about that. But yeah, it's
I think there's a deliberateness to agapic love. It's not just your kid picks up stuff from you by osmosis. It's when you are actively caring for the other person, for actively trying to make that person to pass on what you need to pass on. I think we have a drive. Well, as a parent, I know there's a drive to a deep desire to pass on and help create these little people, and so it's not accidental. There's an intentionality to agape.
It's an intentionality.
When we're talking about like raising children, it strikes me that this example of like, if you had no parents, then the person wouldn't form. Okay, I'll leave that to the psychologist or something. But like just in a modern regular family, there seem to be like in the modern context really huge disconnects where like you have your child and then your child is getting an awful lot of influence from social media and wherever their attention is. And that's is vastly different from the parent. The parent's off working, so they're not even in the presence of the kid. The kid's off at school and daycare and da-da-da. So like a real disconnection between the kid and the child. And then you have to ask, like, that agape love that the parent would have for the kid is not as well expressed as it might be in the modern context.
Yeah, but even before the child goes to school, like when a child is like until 3 years old, if you don't feed it, if you don't nurture it, if you don't, and we were talking about the child will grow to be whatever they are. Yes, but it's heavily dependent on the parents. A trivial example is like you don't learn the language unless you have somebody speaking the language, or you learn the language of the people around you, normally your parents. So, and a lot of other things you learn from the environment that you grow in. And I think when he's talking about this making your personality, making you into a person, making your sense of self, there's all these things that we learn from the people around you, which is mainly the parents in the beginning. And then, of course, the school and all that Matthew was talking about.
But I don't know if this is right, but I guess I'll play with this idea. It seems like there's the love that you receive in agape, or the love that you give in agape. I'll go with the one for giving. The love that you give in agape is so that something can be on its own. So that something can stand on its own. It's not that so that you can receive something back. The reciprocity works different. And in the same way for receiving it, it's different from well you're consuming so that you can live on your own. Well, I'm thinking about a child in that sense, but also a tree. Yeah, like receiving water from something that is very much other than itself, just so that it can be on its own. And which is interesting compare when you compare it to the other kinds of love. Or yeah.
And John talks about the godlike power of agape, that when you're, and I guess this also links it to the Christian concept of agape, that when you have a godlike power to transform. And that's I guess that's how you can reconcile sort of a more secular and Christian concept of agape, that we become vessels through which agape creates other human beings, and then we participate in it. We help other people come to personhood through us.
My turn to chime in. I'm seeing a parallel here also with like a citizen thing, like being the way that we are citizens, I'll say like of the world, just for simplicity, and how the world is in response to that, like what that relationship is, that there is a place there for agapic love where you're like, I want humanity to succeed, which sounds like a bold thing, but not really, to be in favor of that and to have like sort of agapic love toward humanity, to have it flourish. But you're not going to be the one, like it's big time scale things. You're not going to be the one that benefits. Like people doing stuff for future ancestors where they think, oh yeah, we could just throw the stuff in the river, but and it's not just because I don't want a polluted river, it's because it would be a great offense to like leave that to the future. And so you have this agapic love toward, like, you want to be good shepherds of the planet. So I think it's tied in at a lot of different scales. Like it doesn't have to be just, it gets kind of confusing with other forms of love when you think of like family members or babies. I kind of liked Ebenezer's example of the plant, because I think there's some things like you want the plant to flourish, you want the plant to then have other plants and then propagate and flower. Like you want the propagation of that thing at a level that's, more than just the success of that one plant.
So I'm trying to answer a question in the back of my head, which is, do you have to receive agape first before you can give agape? And going back to the plant example, so we love the plant, we're giving the plant sunlight and water and soil, and the plant receives that. And so going back to the parent-child analogy, the parent loves the child and the child receives the love. So when you receive the love, that's the love of eros. So that's the love of consuming, which I kind of have a question, by the way, is because I've only heard of eros in the context of romantic love, not necessarily just a consuming love. So that's kind of an interesting one for me. But I'll use the word consuming love. And so we can consume things and make them ours and become one with them in that sense. But agape seems to be, it's not consuming, it's just giving. It's just a sense of giving away. And so in that sense, it seems like eros is a finite form of love, because we're finite. We take something that's finite and make it ours. But if we're participating in agape, and I think you can only participate in agape, I don't think you could truly grasp it or make it yours. It's infinite in the sense where it's like a relay race where you have a torch and you're passing it on or passing it down. And so if you have agape, or if you're giving love, then that love that goes to the next person, it either ends with them in eros or it gets passed down again. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah. I was thinking very much about a tree. Like if a human didn't plant it, then what would plant the tree? And you'd say it's another tree that would have dropped a seed on it, and then another tree would have done that. And it's almost like this, like infinite relay that you're talking about. But and in the same way that if the tree doesn't end up if the tree ends up bearing no fruit, none of the seeds grow into another tree, or they die out. It's almost like it becomes a very like quick and fast stop of that continuation. Just in the same way with, like, you'd say a family, if, for generations, your ancestors have been, making more of themselves, and then it stops at you, then it very easily and quickly just sort of falls off. So I don't think it can be made without without this agapic. I don't think it can be given without being received first. Yeah.
I have interesting ideas. Was listening to the talk of Richard Dawkins with Brett Weinstein, and it was amazing. They talked about how evolutionary we pass on certain traits. And let's say, so from parent to a child. And I'm thinking about agape here. There are parents who pass on to their children will to fight. And they train their children to be fighters. Like I heard my mom say, well, I've raised you all fighters, so you should not complain, right? Like I was like trying to complain, and like she's like, you're a fighter, say thank you. And I was like actually trying to understand if agape, that idea to raise your child stronger than the rest by, let's say, unconventional methods, I will not name them, is a form of love. I would like to Valeria to go next after me.
I would say that there is love in the intention, but not necessarily skillfulness in realizing that intention, depending on what method has been used there, which we don't know. But there's definitely a lot of instances. I think in the 20s, it was when behaviorism was very common, or when they invented it, or just when behaviorism started existing. They believed that children were blank slates, and that you should train children to be whatever you wanted them to be. So there was a lot of misguided parents with good intentions trying to follow basically bad advice. But if you think about attachment theories today, one of the things that seems to have a lot of evidence for is that you learn to love through the type of love that your parents gave you. So going back to what Peter was saying, that can you learn to love agapically if your parents if you didn't receive that? If you look into attachment theories, they would say no, that the quality of the attunement, the care, the selflessness, the type of love that your parents gave you, it's going to be very important in determining your capacity to love other people as you grow up. So those were my thoughts on it.
Interesting. Oh, it made me think of the even though it's politically sensitive at the moment, girls playing with dolls, like young girls playing with dolls, where they're treating it as a baby, and they are basically, they're play acting the roles they see in their mother and their parent, their caregiver, and they're replicating that. And then hopefully in that play is also like this care of the baby, although comically goes wrong on occasion. But like some of that is like training to have this care of other, where you're like, well, you're the mother and you're like, baby will die if you don't feed it, and kind of thing. And so anyway, so there's some degree of like agapic training in there, where, I don't know, lessons from the parenting of like, it's not always pleasant to parent, but that's what we do because we care about you and it's what you have to do. And the kid getting like a concrete version of those lessons. I'll go ahead and pass to the next person, but that just strikes me as like an interesting training ground. There are different places I encountered it, but in my own childhood, I would say more toward the plants and nature, what I would just nature in general. And I'll leave a question out here, which is like ecology, where you're going to save a species. Like you say, we're trying to be ecologically good stewards of the planet. If we're going to try to save a species from extinction, what is the motivation behind that? Is that agapic, or is that just because, like, say, a species of plant? Like, are you trying to save it because you don't? Well, why? What's the motivation there? Is it just because you're like, well, it could be a good drug, it could be something we don't know in there? That's not agapic love. Like, that's how do I use this thing? That would be like a reciprocal. I'm utilizing something, but like, I want this plant to exist because it was given in a way, it came to be, and I don't want it to go away because it's a loss of potential. So like that, I guess the true ecologist who's like, no, we don't want to lose any species or as few as we can. And not just because we have to study it before it goes away, but like for some deeper reason. And I would argue that that's rooted in agape.
Yeah, I mean, caring for the planet as a whole because we depend on it. I think there can still be an agapic. There can be an agapic aspect to it, even though it's a bit reciprocal. There is a bit of reciprocal. I've got to care for the planet because I depend on this planet to sustain me.
But really, it's only
yeah.
toward the future, though. Like it's our things we do now are going to affect people 100 years from now far more than they affect us.
Right. So that's an agapic element because you're giving. John talks about the forgiveness aspect of agape, that you're giving yourself before the person earns it. So you're giving yourself to the planet before the planet has earned it, or before the future. You're giving yourself you're sacrificing part of yourself for future generations. And so they haven't earned that because they don't exist yet. But I think that's a form of agape. Now it could be, if it's very, I think people can get very identity-like with it. This is just part of my identity. I do this. And that's where I think maybe they're getting away from agape.
Awkward pause.
No.
We are waiting all for Peter.
Sorry.
For Peter to go.
Well, I was just thinking about this idea of love as creation, and this what Ebenezer was talking about with our ancestors, and how we come from generation to generation that propagates over time, and I just wonder if there's a connection between evolution and agape, because evolution is usually regarded as a cold process. And you were talking about Richard Dawkins and Brett Weinstein's conversation about how they pass down traits from parent to child. But that's not just true psychologically, that's also true genetically as well. And so I wonder if agape is a part of this process of evolution, or if it's just because if it is, that would make it physically real as well, or like it agape is not just some kind of concept, but it's also physically present as well, which would make it much more powerful, I think.
Well, there's obviously a survival element to agape, because you're, again, just this act of creating the next generation helps propagate the species. So it's deeply immersed in the human way of raising children. It keeps things.
And thinking about I guess the way that Matthew was talking about it, it seems like oh no, I lost my train of thought there. What were you just talking about? Sorry, Brent.
just the
so I can second
survival,
my thought.
the survival aspect of agape.
Yes, and thinking about it, it's like I guess Matthew was talking about the way that it can go from the individual level out to like family, community, and then out into humanity. It's almost like in this way, it's all of those acting in the same way because you're loving like you're taking care of this child, but also with some reason for the survival of our our species, and it's like this smallest level of just family and also like biggest level of I'm keeping the like species alive as well. And I don't know,
Yeah, I'm always a little bit skeptical of evolutionary psychology because humans are just so unique in comparison to other animals that kind of extrapolate too much from other animals to what humans are. I'm not saying that there is nothing there, but I'm saying that it's often very far-fetched what the conclusions that evolutionary psychology comes to. But I would say that it seems to be very likely that we have embedded in our genetic some mechanisms for loving this, like loving babies in this unearned way that or undeserved because the baby cannot do anything for me, right? I'm just loving the pure potential of the baby. And I think one thing that is uniquely human is that we can, as John said, we can accept that love and love other adult human beings in the same way that a parent loves a child. This unearned love that helps them develop, that helps them grow, that helps them increase their capacity to love, which is what I understood, if I understood correctly, what Christianity did. At least that's my understanding of it. Peter, do you want to chime in?
No, I don't have any thoughts right now.
Brett?
Well, I guess just on the survival benefit, I know it's kind of cold to think of love as a tool for survival, but it's a method that we have developed through evolution, I think, for caring for our young, and it's crucial to the human species. It's the primary mechanism that we care for our young and propagate the species. So I think it still has. I know I'm also wary of the stories that are told by evolutionary biologists, but at its basic, if we just keep it to a basic story of agape love helps the young survive, then I think that's a simple story that's probably pretty close to true.
I'm hearing in all this that people who are parents, there's like a natural place for them to experience agapic love, because raising kids is difficult and all the sacrifices that one makes in that. And I'm wondering about people whose life patterns don't involve that. Like if they're then way more open to solipsism and just about themselves and in what way am I a victim and all those narratives, as opposed to looking outward and saying, oh, where is agapic love in my life? If it's not, I guess I can have pets, and plants, but it's a much smaller thing than having a new person go out into the world, who's been shaped by that agapic love.
So are you saying that there's limits to it, like limits to the agapic love that you can give to a plant compared to, say, your own child?
I guess I'm saying that in the love of a child, that's a very natural place where I think it's gonna come out in the process. Like you're gonna be faced with challenges and things that you're gonna have to overcome and realize that you're doing it for reasons other than to advance
other than
yourself and
yourself.
your own self-interest,
Mhm.
right? So like you're suddenly like, oh crap, you know, and then that's transformative because you have to be that way because there's a person who's fully dependent on you.
I was thinking about that in especially in the eyes of the question that you gave, trying to save this like this one species of, you'd say, fish or something from dying out, and you were wondering why would we do that, or what kind of love is that? And it seems like it's almost a love from, well, firstly, it's almost like a perspective that is greater than like a perspective on something as greater than it is. In the same way with, you know, this tree or this child, it's a perspective on it that is greater than what it is. So even though the fish might not be doing anything now, or this one plant might not be of any use to us in terms of consuming, it seems like the love that causes us to, you know, I guess, take care of it or try to save it is something, is a love where we're seeing it as something greater than it is. Yeah.
Hmm.
And if you turn into, if you turn from that love of giving to a love of trying to have, then it, I guess it veers away from agapic love.
Yeah, I'd say like as soon as you have another, if you have a reason that you want it, like if there's a reciprocal nature in there, it's like
Yes,
that's
exactly.
you can suddenly go like,
an
oh,
apple tree.
that's not it.
Yeah, like an apple tree that you're growing, but you wanted to produce mangoes or something. Yeah, it's like you want your child to be this type of person, but you know, it's an apple tree that you're trying to get mangoes out of. And then because you've brought in the having mode, like trying to have something, it sort of loses that agapic nature to it, where it becomes, I guess, twisted and lost. Yeah, it malfunctions.
Your analogies about the trees made me think of Jakuba Savodogo.
Excuse us.
Jakuba Savodogo, he's famous for being the man who stopped the spread of Sahara further to the south. So even though he did not know how to read and write, somewhere in the 80s, he noticed that the desert starts spreading down. It's like it grows basically. And he decided, well, I will basically take like whatever, this sort of axe or whatever, and he dug a ton of holes in the not fertile ground, and he put some fertilizer in there, and he planted plants. And within 30 years, he grew kind of a garden in there, preventing the spread down. And then National Geographic made a documentary about him. He went to US. I think President Obama gave him a medal or something. Like, he became very famous for just doing that. Like, one man who just seen it, and he decided this desert is bad for my family. He had a family. He loved his family, and that's what he wanted to do. Unfortunately, the story ended badly for him, because the government of his country asked him to pay taxes on the land, because when he bought the land for coins, it was unuseful desert land which cost nothing, and he didn't have to pay any taxes for it. And after he converted it into garden, the government, well, it's obviously a farmer's land, and here is the bill. And so he became bankrupt, and the government took away his land. So
Man,
this is the story of Jakuba Savodogo, which is like made a huge impression on me. But I want to say that idea where we out of love, because to me it's basically agape. He loved his family, he loved his life, he loved everything, and he sacrificed his life basically for it. He dedicated his life to it. And yeah, even though it deviated into many forms, I wanted to talk about extended beyond family. because not everybody, of course, like the chances that everyone has a family and the love and the teaching to pass on to, I don't know, it's not 100%, of course, but there are people who despite that, despite not having children, let's say, they still use the same things, like Jakuba Savadoga, another couple in Brazil who didn't have any children, and they just like for 20 years planted forests. That's what they did. They just like went around, well, we will not have children, but we will plant forests for children of the world. And basically they keep doing that. So I wanted to talk about that, bring that kind of service to children of other people, leaving something behind. So Peter, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, this idea of charity, I think, is tied up with agape. I know that the word agape gets translated into the word charity in the King James Version of the Bible. So whenever they use the word agape, it becomes charity, but other versions just use the word love, which I think is a mistake, because I think charity captures it much more. It's a better way of capturing it, because charity is not really an emotion, while love can or cannot be it's kind of an equivocated word in our language. It can mean many different things, and but charity is usually not an emotion. It's an action, or it's something that you do. And I think agape is the same. I think agape it's more of a behavior than it is a feeling. And so but I think it's also something that you have to have within you as well. It's not necessarily just a description of the action itself. And being able to be unconditionally charitable or altruistic in that regard, I think is a characteristic of agape. So yeah, going back to this idea of does one must receive agape to give agape? I'm familiar with the attachment style studies, and how one's attachment style is directly correlated with the way that they were raised. And it's a little bit of an uncomfortable truth, I would say, because it would mean that those that did not receive agape or did not receive a proper childhood would not grow up to become proper adults, or be able to have that agapic love as well. However, there was this idea that Vervaeke was mentioning about how Christ made agape available for all. So it's kind of like this idea that there's always going to be hope, even if you didn't receive it in the way in which you were supposed to or could have. And that's something that I want to explore, that I want to know more about, is how is that made available for all, and how does that work? How can one access that?
I would say that there's a little bit of an imaginal exercise there into seeing the world as if the ultimate guiding principle of the universe was a loving father that is always there for you, that knows you deeply and knows all your flaws. Can you imagine that? Somebody that can see deeply into all my flaws and everything that I have, that it's the most terrible in me, like the deepest of the darkness of my soul, and is totally okay with it and loves me in spite of that, and can see the beauty and wants more beauty to be realized, and wants me to be more than I am, and wants me to grow, and wants me to flourish. Seeing the world through those eyes, that can there's a lot of power in that. And also seeing yourself as an instrument of that love in relation to other people, and seeing their potential, seeing their beauty, seeing their, I don't know, their Buddha nature, just to mix things up a little bit, and wanting that to flourish, wanting that to find expression. I think there's a lot of beauty and potential in it.
Kara, you mentioned non sort of baby oriented agape. It makes me think, and I'm not entirely sure on this, but an entrepreneur, a small business owner who's just starting his own business, gives up everything, sacrifices everything, leverages himself to the hilt to create something, that aspect of creation, and puts everything they have in it. I think that there is an element of agape, or there could be. It's not necessarily, because that entrepreneur could be entirely cynical and just doing things in a very non-agapic way. But I think there can be it, especially in the early stages of corporations, of certain corporations. I think, Google started off with the motto, do no harm. And I think it may have become something else, but the beginning of these things, I think that anytime you have that self-sacrifice mixed with creation, I think you're touching on agape.
It's an interesting place in the form of the entrepreneur, especially if we get profit motives mixed in there. But I think I agree with you in the idea that, especially like a small business entrepreneur, where they have to give so much of their life to really give this thing, which is the corporation, its identity. And that fits really well with John's. You have to, part of you forms it and it forms you. And I can see that happening with an entrepreneur in a strong business effort where they're trying to give birth to this thing. And at the end, it's going to have its own life. And so, maybe it gives some profit back to you, but if it's something that lives beyond you, because it's a corporation that's going to live hundreds of years or something, there's a space in there for the agapic creation and the potential of that thing that you helped induce. That's interesting.
Well, remember, you also hope I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You also hope your kids give you something back as well. So the relationship with your kids is ideally not all one way. There's reciprocity involved down the road.
But your motivation for reciprocity makes it non-charity. I
Right.
like the charity word where you could just go, if you gave it because you were hoping for something now I'm forgiven because I gave the money. You're like, okay, that's not it.
Right. It's not just agape. It's
Yeah.
many different things all simultaneously, but agape is just one part of it.
And it's I like what you said, Matthew, about part of you is within the company, in as much as it's in as much as you're a part of it is within you. And it's almost like that's I guess I was thinking throughout while you guys were talking, I was thinking about the perspective that you take within yourself, of I guess somebody that knows yourself, like what Valeria was saying, somebody that knows yourself, somebody that knows you, your good and bad, and every single part of you, but still sees some beauty in you, still sees potential for growth. And it's almost like you're training yourself to take that perspective. Like, say in Christianity, you're training yourself to take that perspective on yourself and the world, so that you can engage with yourself in a way that promotes growth, or in a way that allows you to create or to propagate. And it's I guess it's a way that you can also access agape without being loved in that way, by taking that different perspective. Yeah.
Thank you, Benizer. I got a question from Valeria. Is how agape related to metta? And
I was just thinking about that, actually. Yeah, because I don't know, when I was talking about the different perspectives, I was thinking about how that's related to metta, and how we're sort of fixed in this view, but it's almost stepping back and then trying to engage with yourself in a different way. And I guess that could, well, I'm not sure, but it seems like it could bring forth, agape, this love for something that isn't yet. Yeah, by taking on this different perspective. Like okay, personally, I love the perspective that Valeria was talking about. This person who sees every part of you, but still sees beauty within you. And it's almost like because you've taken that perspective, you're trying to find the beauty within yourself or the potential for growth. That value that's not quite realized yet because you are still stuck in this perspective, but it's almost like you're taking a different perspective so that you can grow yourself or make or realize another part of yourself. Yeah.
I was thinking some things here, and that is how much we have internalized the Christian values to the point of taking them for granted. And for example, our problems with self-esteem, how much is, or the inner critic and all those problems that we have that don't seem to exist that much in other countries or in other cognitive grammars. And I wonder if that is related to having the idea of original sin, but not having the redeeming parent that forgives you despite of your being sinful, despite our sinful nature. Yeah, and in relation to meta, that is, I don't have an answer. That's why I asked the question.
So I think so meta is loving kindness type of meditation, and I think meta itself is probably not agape, but meta can maybe help foster feelings of agape. Can help foster agape in you, and you were mentioning the love for a child, the agape for a child comes easy, and like Matthew was saying, it just comes naturally, and it's a little harder to have agape towards others, or it doesn't come as naturally. But meta might help foster might help foster those feelings of agape for others who are not your traditional recipients of agape,
Like your enemy.
and including your enemy.
Yeah, like it's almost like you're fixed in this perspective, but meta allows you, well, through meditation, meta allows you to take a step back from that perspective and sort of see them in another light, or it allows you to agapically engage with something as if it is growing, as if it is more than it is. All these explanations that we've been given of agape, I guess meta allows you to step back and engage with it in that respect, in an agapic sense. Yeah. Like if I view, I don't know, Brett as my enemy, and I have all these fixed perspectives on, who he is, then I guess through meta, I can take a step back and try to like take a different perspective in engagement with him. Like, maybe Brett is like a helpful guy, he can help me with this project or something like that, instead of, he's my enemy, I have to destroy him because he's interfering with my project. Yeah. And I guess that's how meta can, I guess, foster agape.
I'm thinking of the difference. One of the places where I see a difference is that meta, like when I think of applying meta to oneself, which is common in the meditation as one of the steps, that agape, can you have agapic love toward oneself? And what does that look like? Because it can't be in your own self-interest. Like if you're just like, I'm suffering, and then my agape is to like reduce my suffering because I want to suffer less, that's not agapic. Like that may be, toward the benefit of yourself. But it does feel like there's maybe a corner in there somewhere where you can have agapic love toward yourself, but it's got to be for goals that are other than like toward your own ends, toward your own benefit.
So how do you think a agapic love towards yourself is formed then in that?
How's it formed?
Yeah. How
I
do
think
you
I think
engage
your
with
point about
yourself
training it.
agapically?
I think your point about that you can train this partially by meta exercises, which like start with self, which is like in line with your self-interest, and then goes outward to different circles and even enemies and things that you've conceived in a rigid way, and to help loosen the way you're conceiving of those things. So I think that kind of practice of looking at that and seeing what your relationship is to all of those things and people is part, I think, of that can be helpful to like unlog jam. So I don't know if that's quite training agapic behavior.
Is it like
But
training?
like demonstrating you demonstrate charity with children, like if you have a practice in your family of having the kids gather up the old toys that aren't too trashed and donating them, or even taking some allowance and going buying toys and then giving them at Christmas as opposed to just receiving at Christmas. That would be like a genuine example where you're trying to train agapic thought. You know, like why do we give presents to the other kids? And you know, they can see like, oh, it's not just a holiday to get stuff, to
I
get
see.
stuff.
It's almost like you're training yourself to see things more than they are.
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
Or to say like, and that goes back to like you're training it in yourself, and you're having this dance. It shapes you, and the way John talked about like salience landscape, and the way you start shaping your world, looking for how to be agapic, or you know, or places where you could be different. And that changes what's salient to you. Like you'll go, I don't want to go there. It's not a good space. And so that could end up shaping you.
No, there are times when it happens. I don't know if when you're depressed sometimes, or when you discover something about, when you realize something about your shadow, and you discover something in you that you don't like, or that I have discovered things in me that I don't like. That in that moment, that quality of loving the potential, of loving, giving the undeserved charitable love that will allow me to grow beyond this, to develop, to flourish, to unfold as a person. I think it's very similar to this, the love of the parent to the child. It's almost reparenting of myself, and it's like, yeah, there is this negative thing about me, but I will love myself despite of that, so that love will help me grow into a person that will be more deserving of that love. Something like that.
Yeah, it's got to be, agape is not supposed to be self-centered, but I think you can have a more non-self-centered approach to yourself, that you want to become a better person. You want to become somebody different, not just, oh, I want a car, oh, I want a new video game just to have fun, but I want to become somebody better, is sort of taking a more agapic approach to yourself. So there's an aspirational aspect to self agape.
Becoming something better than you are.
Right. And we probably don't do enough self agape. It's probably more, I don't know if it would be eros, but we probably should try to think of ourselves in a more agapic manner.
I like the term you said, self agape. And I was thinking about the other two forms of love, self eros and then self philia.
Self philia feels easy, like
yeah,
to befriend oneself and to take that position.
I'm egophile. Sorry.
Are you saying it's easier to befriend yourself than to love yourself like a parent loves a child?
Yeah, I guess it's because you're just aiming at yourself. I mean, you're trying to, in that cooperative mode, like it doesn't point to anything outside of you, whereas agape does.
I'm thinking about relationship to forgiveness. I remember John had this word play, forgiveness. You give
Oh.
before.
Mhm.
Forgive. And then he also knocked on the table. Forgive. And we talked about it. I was like, okay. And that idea of forgiveness is related to agape. Like he used both of those, like he used the example of Jesus and Jesus' teaching, forgiving and agape. Like even in that clip, he kind of made a connection there. Be forgiven.
I see. It's like given before. Okay. Yeah. It's like I'm
Giving it
gonna give
before
you.
it's been earned.
It's
Yeah.
not just before in the sense of like a causal chain, but it's your existence is for to give. Like the
Tell me.
purpose of your existence is to give. Or if agape means giving and you love agapically, or you're an instrument of agape, then forgive means that the for means purpose or denotes purpose. If it's before means that it's what it's for, or like its existence is for this. Forgive is your purpose is to give. That's the idea behind forgiveness there.
It's almost like you go into a being mode of given, being mode for given. Okay.
And it's
That
not a
makes more sense.
reciprocal, like you're not giving because you're going to get,
because you're getting,
or
yeah,
anticipation. You're
it's
not
just
like it's a
giving.
transaction. You're like, nope, forgiveness. Like, I'm only going to forgive this person if they admit they're wrong. And you're like, okay, that would probably not be
Forgiven.
like an unconditional form of forgiveness.
I see.
That's weird. Etymology is interesting. I wonder what the word forget has to do with that. Forget means to lose memory of it.
Yeah. Because it has the memory aspect to it. It seems like forgiven doesn't just involve like it's say having something wrong done to you and then giving them the benefit of the doubt or something like that. It seems like it's bigger than that. I don't know what you guys think.
I mean, in a relationship, it definitely, if you want to keep the relationship, the forgiving, it's like, yeah, right now you don't deserve all the credit that I'm giving you, but in the name of our relationship, I forgive you. So it fits in that case.
And that's aiming at something outside yourself, right? Trying to save that relationship, for the health of the flourishing and the potential of the relationship. You're like, I'm going to sacrifice, whatever it is in the moment, being right.
I see. And it seems like, okay, when you guys were talking, it seems like in all those situations, you have to have a perspective that is greater than you. Like you'd say the relationship or yourself. Like, I'm gonna forgive this person because I don't want to deal with the stress. Even though it's a bit selfish, it's still for the benefit of your future self, which is you'd say something greater than you are now. Yeah. It seems like you always have to have that perspective of something greater, of something beyond you.
Yeah, there's got to be not always going to say an analogy, but a linkage here to marriage, where like the marriage itself between the people becomes something that's greater than either one of them that they're willing to sacrifice to because of the potential for its future flourishing together.
Do you think
you're
that's
taking on discomfort or something because you're like, there's good here. Like I'm doing this because there's a positive potential that is not something that's just mine.
Do you think that's agapic? And I guess we'd have to make the difference between what marriage used to be and what marriage is now. I don't know, because
I guess
it
I'm
seems
pointing
like
at
it's
an
changed.
idealized,
An
like
idealized
like
sense.
a really good marriage that was founded on this agapic love of what would be the potential of joining the two people's lives together. And you're like, it's not just about you get a good life, I get or I want a nice life. It's whatever's going to come from the blending of the two people.
I want to give myself to the marriage, not to just this other person.
Yeah.
And what fruits come out of it. I see.
And I guess for whom, as like if there's kids, then they're going to benefit, but also just the community and what that pairing can then bring to the world.
Peter, did you end up finding the etymology of that of forgetting?
Yes, well, it's kind of complex, as etymology usually is. So we could just be making up our own stuff here that happens to be coincidental, but for usually means away opposite, but it also means completely. So in the context of forget, it's probably meaning away, get, so like, or to grasp. But in the context of forgive, it could be meaning completely to give. So it's kind of weird. It seems like one of its definitions of for is opposite, but it also has an opposite definition between completely and away. So it's kind of tricky.
So you'd say forgetting is getting away from something,
Yeah, forget
like a thought.
means you have a grasping of something, or it's a way to grasp. So you're taking something that you would grasp and putting it away, which makes sense because that's to forget means to lose a memory or something like that.
Yeah, that sparked so many thoughts at the moment. Now I'm thinking about transcendence, but we don't have time for it. We are coming near an end. So I would like to invite you to check out. What do you take from this today's stream? Are there any open questions that we can explore some other time? And the way we do it is I name a person to check out, and then person passes on the torch. Agapically, of course. Alternate.
I like how this carries from our dialogue as practice. So, and in that vein, I tend to look at these things to try to get out of the pure propositional, like I looked up a definition and I got a thing on it. Now I feel warm and fuzzy, and try to think like, all right, how does this map into my own life in ways that matter? So it's not just a conceptual exercise and play. And one of the things from today's conversation that strikes me is this idea of like, how can you determine what your motive, or to look at your motivation, like what are you aiming at in something, and to recognize, when you're doing something for yourself, you're like, that was not a selfless act. It seems really simple when you put it with this self in the same sentence like that. But I think that there's a lot of times where I'm doing things where I think I'm doing it for other people. And there's a lot of, it's a blend of motivations, of course. But to just kind of be aware of where I'm doing something, and it's just, it's not in that agapic vein. So hopefully it helps me be a better person. And I think I'll pass to Ebenezer.
I guess the most interesting thing to me was the different perspectives that you have to take, and also the potential that you see when you agapically love something, because you're engaging with something's potential rather than like what they are, and it's almost like this other perspective that you take on it rather than your own, and it's a perspective of something greater, like what's within the relationship rather than the other person, or something greater than yourself rather than who you are now. Yeah. So I think, yeah, that's the most interesting part for me. I'll pass it on to Valeria.
Yeah, I think what I take away is this idea of giving something or somebody my love, my care, my attention, my time, selflessly, just for the love, or for the joy of seeing that thing flourish and develop and bloom, be it myself, be it a baby, a plant, or just giving my love to something to let it grow, let it unfold in its own terms, not in my terms, but it's in its own terms. Brett?
I think as a parent, I've had a lot of practice with the parental forms of agape, but I find the concept of self agape interesting, and I want to look for ways where I'm not treating myself as a I guess a valued subject of agape for myself. So that's an interesting concept to play around with. And thank you, Kara, for moderating and for having me today, and for everyone for the great discussion. And I'll pass it to Peter.
Something that I really liked was what Valeria was bringing up earlier in the conversation about agape as a taking on the imaginal view of the universe or the force behind existence, as a father that can see all of your faults and shortcomings, yet loves you despite them for what you can become, as what Ebenezer was saying, the love of potential instead of actuality, which is another idea I would want to think about a little bit further. And then another idea that's going to stick with me is the one that Algernon and Brett came up, which was this idea of mixed motivations behind things, where it may not be possible for us to fully be an instrument of agape in this moment. However, that doesn't mean that we have to have it be all one way or the other. We could still have many motivations for our actions that aren't necessarily all or nothing. And so because of that, we can then cultivate the thing that we want to cultivate instead of have to expect that we are either there or that we're not there, and then have that be the end of that. So anyways, thank you guys very much. This was very enlightening. And thank you, Cara.
Thank you, everybody. It's been lovely. I have more open questions actually than answers. For example, I still would like to find out, and I will research it later, about how can I train, embody, cultivate more agape, self-agape, if it's a thing, love towards others. Yeah, it's an interesting concept. And the idea to see what is there, like in example with Jakuba Savadogo, who I will provide the links below after the stream, who seen the land for what it is. He loved the land because his family lived there for generations. And he's seen the land that it's suffering, that it's getting worse, and he loved it and he took care of it. So I was thinking about that form of love as well. Agape connected to action, passing on the torch, making the world better around us, passing the torch of potential. How can we do that? Everybody, please join the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis Discord server. The link is in the invitation is below, and all the wonderful practices. Brett has book clubs on Saturday and Sunday. Valeria has dialogos and mindful relating practice. And I hope there will be more practices. Yes. Thank you.